For years, gardeners have been told the same thing. If your soil is weak, buy fertilizer. If your plants look yellow, buy nitrogen. If your tomatoes stop growing, buy another bag. If your soil dries too fast, buy moisture crystals. If the roots are small, buy root booster. And if none of that works, buy everything again next season. But what if the problem was never that your soil needed more food? What if the real problem was that your soil had no life left inside it? And what if one black powder, something so cheap that many people throw it away, could turn dead dirt back into living soil? Not overnight, not like a chemical that gives your plants a quick green flash and then disappears, but slowly, deeply, permanently. A black powder that does not just feed the plant, it rebuilds the world beneath the plant. The tunnels, the microbes, the fungi, the moisture, the hidden underground system that makes soil act like soil again. And here is the strange part. This is not new. It is not a modern invention. It is not some expensive laboratory product with a bright label and a $39 price tag. Ancient farmers understood this idea long before garden centers existed. They used fire. They used waste. They used carbon. And they created soil that stayed dark, rich, and alive for generations. Today, that same idea can be recreated in a backyard with something that costs about $1. A black powder. A forgotten amendment. A substance that looks dead at first glance. But when it is prepared correctly, it becomes one of the most powerful homes for soil life ever placed in the ground. And by the end of this video, you will understand why poor soil is not always poor because it lacks nutrients. Sometimes, poor soil is poor because nothing can live there long enough to make those nutrients available. That is the part most people never learn. And once you see it, you may never look at a bag of fertilizer the same way again. This is the story of the $1 black powder that turns dead soil into living soil. 1. The mistake every gardener makes about dead soil. Dead soil does not always look dead at first. Sometimes it looks normal. It is brown. It is dry. It holds a plant upright. You can dig it, water it, and plant seeds in it, but something is missing. You water in the morning, and by afternoon the surface is cracked. You add fertilizer, and the leaves turn green for a week, then fade again. You mix in compost, but the improvement never seems to last. The plant grows, but it never thrives. The stems stay thin. The roots stay shallow. The soil becomes hard after every rain, and every season the same cycle repeats. Buy fertilizer, add compost, water more, mulch more, try again. And still the garden feels like it is always one step away from failing. Most gardeners blame themselves. They think they watered wrong. They think they planted too late. They think they chose the wrong seed. But in many cases, the real issue is much deeper. The soil has lost its structure. It has lost its biology. It has lost the invisible workforce that turns dirt into a living system. Because real soil is not just ground-up rock. Real soil is alive. A single handful of healthy soil can contain billions of bacteria, fungal threads, protozoa, nematodes, and microscopic organisms most people never see. These organisms are not decorations. They are the workers. They break down organic matter. They unlock minerals. They trade nutrients with roots. They hold water in tiny spaces. They create crumb structure so air can move through the ground. They turn dead leaves into plant food. They are the reason forest soil can feed giant trees without anyone pouring fertilizer on it. But when soil is exposed, compacted, over-tilled, over-fertilized, left bare, baked by the sun, or washed again and again by heavy rain, those organisms disappear. And when they disappear, the soil becomes nothing more than a container, a pot without a system, a field without a pulse. That is why fertilizer alone often fails. Fertilizer feeds the plant for a moment, but it does not rebuild the living world that the plant depends on. It is like giving someone a meal while leaving them homeless in a storm. They may survive today, but nothing about their condition has truly changed. And this is where the black powder enters the story. Because the old farmers who understood soil did not only ask, "What can I feed my plants?" They asked a much more powerful question. Where will the life in my soil live? 2. The black powder that looks useless. At first, this black powder does not look impressive. It looks like crushed charcoal, dry, light, dusty, almost empty. If you hold it in your hand, it stains your fingers. If you drop it on the ground, it disappears into the soil. It does not smell rich like compost. It does not look green like fertilizer. It does not promise anything on a shiny package. And that is exactly why so many people ignore it. Because modern gardening has trained us to believe that powerful things must look powerful. Bright pellets, blue crystals, liquid concentrates, instant formulas, fast results. But some of the most important things in soil do not work fast. They work quietly. They create conditions. They build structure. They give life a place to return. This black powder is often called biochar when it is made correctly. But the idea is simple. Organic material like wood, crop stalks, nutshells, or plant waste is heated with very little oxygen. It does not burn completely into ash. It chars. The smoke and gases leave, but the carbon skeleton remains. What is left behind is not ordinary charcoal from a random fire. It is a stable carbon structure filled with tiny pores, cracks, chambers, and tunnels. To the human eye, it looks like dust, but to soil microbes, it looks like a city. A protected city, a city with walls, a city with rooms, a city with shade. A city where bacteria can hide from drought, sunlight, and heavy rain. A city where fungal threads can anchor themselves. A city where nutrients can be stored instead of washed away. That is the secret. The powder does not perform magic, it provides housing. And in dead soil, housing is everything. Because when the soil has no protected spaces, life cannot stay. You can add compost, but rain can wash nutrients away. You can add fertilizer, but plants use some and the rest leaches downward. You can water deeply, but sandy or damaged soil may let that water disappear too fast. You can try again next season, but nothing holds. Dead soil is not only missing food, it is missing memory. It cannot hold on to what you give it. This black powder changes that. It gives the soil a memory. It gives water a place to pause. It gives nutrients a place to cling. It gives microbes a place to live. And once those microbes move in, the soil begins to change. Not because you forced it, because you gave it the architecture to heal itself. 3. Why dead soil becomes alive again. To understand why this works, imagine two neighborhoods. The first neighborhood has no houses, no shade, no walls, no wells, no storage. Every time the sun comes out, everything bakes. Every time rain falls, everything washes away. You can bring food into that neighborhood every week, but nobody stays. There is nowhere to live. That is damaged soil. Now imagine a second neighborhood. It has small houses everywhere. It has water stored in hidden places. It has protected rooms. It has pathways. It has food storage. It has shade. It has surfaces where life can attach and multiply. Now when organisms arrive, they stay. They build. They reproduce. They form relationships. That is what charged black powder does underground. The important word is charged. Raw black powder is not ready. This is the mistake that destroys results for many beginners. Fresh biochar is like an empty sponge. It has millions of open spaces, but those spaces are empty. If you mix raw biochar directly into your garden bed, it may pull moisture and nutrients from the soil at first. It can temporarily rob nitrogen from young plants. The gardener sees yellow leaves, weak growth, and stress. Then they say, "This black powder does not work." But the powder was not the problem. The preparation was the problem. You do not add empty housing to the soil and expect life to appear instantly. You fill it first. You charge it. You soak it in compost tea. You mix it into finished compost. You combine it with aged manure. You let it sit where microbes and nutrients can move into those pores. For a few weeks, the black powder changes. It is no longer empty. It becomes loaded. Loaded with microbial life. Loaded with dissolved nutrients. Loaded with organic compounds. Loaded with the beginnings of a living ecosystem. Then, when you add it to soil, it does not steal from the plant. It supports the plant. It does not arrive as an empty sponge. It arrives as a living apartment complex. And underground, the effect begins. Bacteria colonize the pores. Fungi thread through the carbon structure. Moisture clings to the internal surfaces. Nutrients that would normally wash away begin to stay. Roots grow toward the zones of life. The soil slowly becomes darker. It becomes softer. It holds water longer. It smells different. It breaks apart differently in your hands. Instead of hard clods or lifeless dust, it begins forming crumbs. And crumb structure is one of the signs that soil is coming back to life. This is why the change can feel slow at first. People want miracles in 7 days. But living soil does not rebuild like that. It rebuilds like a forest, layer by layer, season by season. Life moves in. Roots expand. Organic matter cycles. The soil becomes less dependent. And that is the part that makes this black powder so different from fertilizer. Fertilizer is an event. Biochar is infrastructure. Fertilizer says, "Here is food for now." Charged black powder says, "Here is a home where food can be made, stored, exchanged, and protected." That difference changes everything. 4. The forgotten wisdom of fire and soil. The strange thing is that humans understood this long before modern soil science gave it a name. Ancient people watched what happened after controlled fire. They saw that not all burned material was the same. White ash disappeared quickly. It washed away. It changed soil for a short time. But black char stayed. It did not rot. It did not vanish after one rain. It remained in the ground. And when mixed with food scraps, animal waste, bones, leaves and composting material, it became part of a richer soil. This was not modern chemistry. It was observation. People noticed that some dark soils stayed fertile longer. They noticed that burned organic matter, when mixed correctly, seemed to hold life. They noticed that certain garden beds did not tire as fast, and, over generations, that knowledge became practice. Today, many people call this old-fashioned or primitive, but there is nothing primitive about watching the land carefully enough to know what lasts. Modern gardening often looks at soil as a problem to correct. Ancient soil builders looked at soil as a relationship to maintain. That is why this black powder matters. It reminds us of something simple. The garden is not a machine. It is not a factory. It is not a lifeless container where you pour inputs and extract vegetables. A garden is a living agreement between roots, microbes, fungi, water, minerals, carbon, and time. Break that agreement and you become dependent. Restore it and the soil begins doing work you no longer have to do. This is the part that makes the black powder feel almost hidden. Not because nobody is allowed to know it, but because it does not fit the modern rhythm of buying quick fixes. A product that works slowly, lasts for years, and reduces dependence is not easy to sell every spring. It does not create panic. It does not need bright warnings. It does not promise explosive growth in 3 days. It simply builds the foundation. And foundations are not exciting until everything else stops collapsing. That is why so many gardeners discover it late. They spend years buying products for symptoms: yellow leaves, weak roots, dry soil, poor harvests, compaction, nutrient loss. Then, one day, they learn that the symptoms were connected. The soil had no life, no structure, no protected home for biology. And one black powder could have started repairing that foundation from the beginning. 5. Why fertilizer alone keeps you trapped. This is where the story becomes uncomfortable, because fertilizer does work. That is why people buy it. Add nitrogen and leaves can turn green. Add phosphorus and roots may respond. Add potassium and plants may handle stress better. But the problem is not whether fertilizer can create a response. The problem is what happens after the response ends. If the soil cannot hold nutrients, you must add more. If the microbial community is weak, you must add more. If organic matter breaks down too fast, you must add more. If water runs through the bed too quickly, you must water more. The system becomes dependent, not because gardeners are foolish, but because the soil has been turned into a pass-through container. Everything enters, everything leaves, nothing stabilizes. That is the expensive cycle, and it is the cycle many garden products are built around. One product for growth, one product for roots, one product for pH, one product for water retention, one product for microbes, one product for the problem created by the last product. But living soil does not work like that. Living soil stacks benefits. When structure improves, water retention improves. When water retention improves, microbes survive longer. When microbes survive longer, nutrients become more available. When nutrients become more available, roots grow stronger. When roots grow stronger, plants feed soil organisms with sugars. When organisms multiply, soil structure improves again. It becomes a loop, a living loop. And the black powder helps restart that loop. That is why calling it fertilizer is not quite right. It is not fertilizer in the usual sense. It is not mainly there to feed plants directly. It is there to make the soil capable of feeding plants again. That is a much bigger idea. Because once the soil starts functioning, every future handful of compost becomes more valuable. Every drop of rain is held longer. Every fallen leaf matters more. Every root leaves behind more life for the next plant. The garden stops acting like a bucket with holes. It starts acting like a sponge with memory. And that is when dead soil begins to become living soil. 6. How to make the $1 black powder work. Now comes the practical part, because this is where many people get it wrong. You cannot just grab random charcoal from a barbecue bag and dump it into the garden. Most barbecue charcoal is not made for soil. Some products contain additives, binders, lighter fluids, or chemicals that do not belong near vegetables. You want clean, charred organic material, clean wood char, biochar, or homemade char from untreated wood, dry branches, nutshells, stalks, or plant waste. The material must be clean. No painted wood, no treated lumber, no plastic, no trash, no glossy paper, no chemicals, only clean organic matter. If you buy it, look for plain biochar. If you make it, the goal is charring, not ash. Ash is what remains when material burns too completely. It can be useful in tiny amounts for certain soils, but it is not the same thing. The black powder you want is carbon-rich char, lightweight, porous, crushable, black all the way through. Once you have it, crush it into small pieces. Not dust only, not giant chunks. Think small crumbs. Pieces that can mix through soil but still maintain pore structure. Then charge it. This is the step you do not skip. Take the black powder and mix it with finished compost, or soak it in compost tea, or blend it with aged manure, or mix it into worm castings. Let it sit for at least 2 weeks. 4 weeks is better. Keep it slightly moist, not drowning, not bone dry. Moist enough for life to move in. During this time, the empty pores begin filling. The char absorbs nutrients. Microbes colonize the surfaces. The black powder becomes biologically active. Then it is ready. For garden beds, mix small amounts into the top layer of soil. Do not bury a massive amount all at once around delicate seedlings. Start modestly. Blend it evenly. For containers, mix it into potting soil with compost. For raised beds, combine it with compost before planting. For poor soil, apply it slowly over time instead of trying to transform everything in one day. Remember, the goal is not to shock the soil. The goal is to build a permanent habitat. A little, properly charged, is better than a lot of raw material. That sentence can save your garden. A little charged black powder is better than a lot of raw black powder. Because biology does not respond to quantity alone, it responds to conditions, and charged biochar creates conditions. 7. What happens after you add it? The first thing you may notice is not dramatic. That is important. This is not a green-up chemical. It may not make leaves explode overnight. It may not make your plants double in size by next Tuesday, but underground, the change begins. Water behaves differently. After rain, the soil may stay moist longer. During heat, plants may wilt less quickly. Compost seems to disappear into the bed more naturally. The soil may become easier to crumble. Worms may become more active. Roots may become thicker, whiter, and more branched. The surface may stop crusting as badly, and over time the color of the soil may deepen. That darkening is not just cosmetic. It is a sign that carbon and organic matter are becoming part of the soil system. Season 1 may bring modest improvement. Season 2 may be stronger. By Season 3, many gardeners begin to understand the real value. The soil does not feel as needy. It does not collapse as quickly between feedings. Plants recover faster. Watering becomes easier. Compost works better. Mulch breaks down into something richer. The garden begins to feel less like a fight. That is when the black powder reveals what it really is. Not a trick, not a hack, not magic. It is a foundation, and foundations take time. But once they are built, everything above them changes. 8. The one warning nobody should ignore. There is one more thing to understand. This black powder is powerful because it holds things. But that also means it can hold the wrong things if you are careless. If you make char from contaminated wood, you may concentrate contamination. If you use treated lumber, painted scraps, chemical-soaked material, or unknown waste, you may put things into your soil that you do not want near food. So the source matters. Clean input gives clean char. Dirty input gives dirty char. This is not a place to be lazy. The garden remembers what you put into it. That is the whole point. Biochar lasts, so make sure what lasts is something you actually want there. Use clean wood. Use clean plant material. Use trustworthy biochar. Charge it properly. Apply it with patience and think long-term. Because living soil is not built by panic. It is built by repeated good decisions. 9. Why this feels hidden. People often ask a simple question. If this black powder is so useful, why did nobody tell me? The answer is not always a dramatic conspiracy. It is quieter than that. Modern gardening is built around repeat purchases. Every season, new bags, new liquids, new formulas, new problems, new solutions. But charged biochar does not fit that model very well. It is not something you need to buy every month. It is not exciting in the way instant fertilizer is exciting. It does not create dependency. It reduces it. And things that reduce dependency are rarely promoted as loudly as things that create repeat customers. That is why old knowledge often disappears. Not because it stops working, but because it stops being profitable to talk about. A gardener who builds living soil buys differently. They still may use compost. They still may amend carefully. They still may test soil. But they are no longer chasing every symptom with another product. They are building a system. And a system is harder to sell than a quick fix. But it is much easier to trust. 10. The legacy in a handful of soil. One of the most beautiful things about this black powder is that it outlasts the person who applies it. Most garden products vanish. Rain carries them down. Plants consume them. Microbes break them apart. Sun and water erase them. But stable carbon remains. Season after season, it stays in the soil. It holds life. It holds moisture. It holds nutrients. It becomes part of the underground architecture. A person can mix charged black powder into a bed today, plant tomatoes this year, beans next year, herbs after that, and the carbon will still be there quietly doing its work. Years later, someone else may dig into that soil and notice it. Darker, softer, richer, more alive than the ground nearby. They may not know who added it. They may not know the story. They may not know that the change began with a cheap black powder that looked almost worthless. But the soil will know. That is the difference between feeding a plant and building soil. A fed plant gives you one harvest. Built soil gives harvest to people who come after you. And maybe that is why this forgotten idea matters so much now. Because gardening should not be a yearly battle against dead dirt. It should be the slow creation of a place where life becomes easier. A place where roots find partners. A place where rain is stored instead of wasted. A place where microbes are protected instead of destroyed. A place where the ground becomes better because you touched it. The $1 black powder is not impressive because it is cheap. It is impressive because it changes the question. Not, what can I buy to force my plants to grow? But, what can I build so my soil becomes alive again? That question is the beginning of a different kind of garden. A garden that depends less on bags, less on panic, less on temporary fixes, and more on biology, carbon, patience, and memory. So, before you pour another fast fertilizer into tired soil, look beneath the surface. Ask what is missing. Ask whether your soil needs food, or whether it needs a home for life to return. Because sometimes the thing that wakes up dead soil is not the brightest product on the shelf. Sometimes it is the quiet black powder that ancient growers understood, modern gardeners forgot, and living soil has been waiting for all along. The powder costs almost nothing. The change can last for years. And once the life comes back, the garden does not just grow, it remembers how to live. That is the power of charged black powder. That is how dead soil becomes living soil. And that is why the most important thing in your garden may not be above the ground at all. It may be the dark, hidden world beneath your feet. The world that feeds everything. The world that modern gardening almost forgot. And the world you can begin rebuilding with one handful of black powder.